Welcome to a special edition of the Mythicist Milwaukee show, recorded February 4th, 2017. I'm in the studio with Sean Frasick, myself, this is Brian Edward, and Ron Miscavige. Ron Miscavige is the father of David Miscavige, who is the leader of the Church of Scientology. Ron is also an author, having penned a tell-all book, Ruthless, Scientology, My Son David Miscavige and Me. Ron recently appeared on ABC News 2020 to reveal drastic measures he took to escape from Scientology's Gold Base compound in California. He's also appeared on Leah Remini's new docuseries, Scientology in the Aftermath. Welcome, Ron Miscavige.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.
Ron, thank you so much for joining us. So this is Sean Frasick. Brian, we're co-hosting the show today with Ron. This is really exciting. We wanted to get into how did you find out about Scientology in the beginning?
Okay, well, first of all, my whole life I was always looking for some answers. I couldn't even say the answers to what. Maybe you'd say I was looking for answers in life, okay? Even as a little kid, I remember in my home in Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised, up in our garret, that they called it, they called the attic in those days. My dad had tons of books up there. And I remember as a kid, I don't know, I must have been maybe 8 years old, reading The Prophet by Gibran. And maybe I understood about 10% of it, but I was looking any place to get some answers to life itself. I got involved in a multi-level marketing scheme called Holiday Magic. And
How old were you at the time?
I was in my 30s.
Okay.
I was about 33 those days because I got into Scientology when I was 34, which was in 1970. Holiday Magic was like Amway, you know, where you buy in at a certain level, and the more you buy, the bigger discount you got. And you're trying to get other people to buy in so you can make a profit between what they paid and what you're paying. I was working with a friend whose name was Nelson Sandy, and he was a singer, and he was also a salesman, and I had a sales job at the time. And Nelson said to me one day, how would you like to make an extra $100,000 this year? And let me tell you something, in the 60s, that appealed to me right off the bat.
Yeah, I think a Cadillac was about $3,000.
I don't know, but they were cheaper. Nelson is also the guy that said, I used to be a doctor, but I lost my patience. He had a great sense of humor. We're in a bar. We were in a bar one night playing, and we got off the stage, and the guy came over to the bar and said, Nelson, you're a great singer. Can I buy you a drink? He says, no, but can I have the money? He just one off. He could come with these things, situational humor. So he said to me, you know, would you like to make an extra $100,000? I says, yeah, for Christ's sake, that sounds great. So he took me to a meeting, and at first I was very skeptical, but then as the meeting went on with the guy, I decided to do it. So along with that came forming up a little corporate team, as we called it. And it was four of us, myself, a guy by the name of Jim Hearn, Nelson Sandy, and a girl called, her name was Kathy Francis. That was the team. So we would go out as a group and have these opportunity meetings and try to get people interested in investing in it.
Right.
And I'm at a meeting one day in a place in South Jersey, and I'm talking to a guy, and there's a guy next to him talking to Kathy, and he said, I'm a Scientologist. And I said to this guy, I said, hang on a second, what is that? I mean, for whatever reason, that name rang a bell with me. So I pinned him down, and we must have talked about Scientology and the different things you could do for about a half an hour. And he says, you never have to take another aspirin if you become a Scientologist. I said, really? So he told me of a little procedure to do where you can get rid of a headache. I said, well, I don't have one right now, so I can't try it. You know,
Right.
So he told me what to do if I got one in the future. And I was driving down one of the interstates in South Jersey a couple of weeks later. I thought, wait a minute, I got a headache. I'm going to try it. I tried it, and my headache went away in an instant. I tell about this in the book, by the way. And I'll tell you, at that point, I said, I got to check this out. So now, there was a guy by the name of Frank Ogle who had a cafeteria in Woodbury, New Jersey. And every Tuesday or Wednesday night, either one, he would have a meeting, and he'd discuss various tenets of Scientology. And that's not the way you would do it these days. These days, you have to go, every I is dotted, every T is crossed. You can't change anything, or you were going against the scriptures as by L. Ron Hubbard. This was like freewheeling. This was It was great, actually. So we would go over like the parts of the communication cycle. And I went there for about maybe 3 or 4 meetings, and I thought, well, this is good. You know, I got something out of it, and it did improve my communication. And that's how I first got introduced to Scientology. And then about a year later, I decided to go and take David to see this guy.
How old was David at the time?
He must have been about 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
And David was cursed with asthma from the day he was born. I mean, he had asthma so bad, there were times when he'd turn blue. He could not breathe out. That's the phenomena of asthma. You can breathe in, you can't breathe out. And I used to do really unusual solutions to try to get him to catch his breath again. Matter of fact, one time, it's the wintertime, and he's turning blue. And I thought, Jesus Christ, I've got to do something. So I took him upstairs to our bathroom, took all of his clothes off, took my clothes off, held him in my arms, and I went in the shower. I said, David, look, I'm in it with you, so here we go. I had the hot water on. I turned it off, and that water came out. It was the middle of the winter in South Jersey, and it hit us. And all of a sudden, he going,
Right.
He was breathing.
Yeah.
And I took a Turkish towel, wiped him off, and gave him a kiss, and he was okay. It was,
right.
But what I'm leading up to is this. I knew that wasn't handling it. At best, it was putting a Band-Aid on something. So I decided to take him to see Frank Ogle to do some auditing. Auditing is the word in Scientology they use for counseling. Mm-hmm. And I took him down to his place. I took him out of school that day and took him in. And Frank Ogle says, yeah, let's go. He took him in session. 45 minutes later, David came out smiling, cheerful. I said, man, how did it go? He says, Dad, I'm handled. I'm sure that was his epiphany. Mm-hmm. Because all of my other 3 kids were all healthy, no problem. David sometimes would be breathing so hard at night, catching his breath, I'd go and sit next to his bed and hold his hand to just give him some comfort. This didn't handle it, but it put it in remission, and he never had a serious attack again as a child. That was the point that I decided I want to do this with my family.
So as a father, you had to be thrilled because this is on a big concern. I mean, I really like the shower story and that cold water experience. That's traumatic. So you got in there with him to share it, you know, so because I've done that before. It's a bit of a shock. So what was there in your head? Like, were you trying to figure out how, or did you just not care? Like how this 45-minute auditing session work, or did you say, okay, I think I know why?
No, I didn't think that I knew why, but I'm going to diverge off this just for a second and go back earlier in time. Because I had an incident happen to me when I was in the Marine Corps. I was stationed at a base called Quantico, Virginia, and I had some dental work done. And a couple of days after I had it done, at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my face would go into tremendous pain. I mean, I couldn't take it. I went to the PX and I bought a bottle of bourbon. So it comes 4 o'clock, it'd start coming on. I'd pour myself a shot and lay down till the pain went away. So I did this about 3 or 4 days, and I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, if I keep on doing this, I'm going to become an alcoholic. So I took the bourbon, what was left, poured it in the toilet, threw the bottle out, put on my fatigues, and walked about a mile up to. There was a gym. We had an air station in Quantico, and there was a gym in the building there. Walked in, there's a guy from New York. I says, hey, you want to lift? He says, yeah, let's go. So he spotted me, I spotted him. So I'm doing a set of bench presses in pain. At the end of the second set, I said, here, take the bar. The pain had gone. And I said, hang on a second, let me think about this. I theorized that in order for pain to exist, you had to put your attention on it to give it life. Mm-hmm. And if you got involved in something that was dangerous, like if I dropped that bar in my chest, I'd crush my ribs because we weren't using 25 pounds, okay? So that my theory was if you can do anything to divert your attention from what's getting to you, your pain or whatever it is, it has no life anymore. That was my theory. So with David, there were times when if he started getting an asthmatic attack, this is no baloney, I would take him in the garage. I had weights in the garage, and I'd make him lift weights. And if we caught it early enough, the asthmatic attack wouldn't come on. But if it was too late, he'd get an asthma attack anyway. Guys, I'm telling you.
No, that makes sense. This is, I feel like I see a little bit of Chesty Puller in this, old school Marine Corps.
Maybe, yeah.
Right.
Well, anyway, rise above it.
Yeah.
Don't give in to a little pain in the ass that you may have. Hey, we're going into war. Get with it, man. Hey, listen, boot camp. We started with 89 guys. At the end of that time, we ended up with 59, 1/3 washout. Wow. And that's the time to have people fall to the wayside. You don't want to do it if you're going into a battle with somebody who's going to go week 10.
That's right. That's right.
That was my thinking on David, if I could have diverted his attention from it. But when he went in session, Frank Ogle did something. Well, I'm not going to get into it because it's pretty hard to explain.
But it makes sense.
And it's in the book as well.
Alternative medicines, some people don't matter or don't care about the science. The thing is, it works.
Yeah.
So here, this works for you. That your son's 8 to 9 years old. He consistently has asthma.
Yeah.
So this draws you in. What happens next? So how do you kind of go deeper?
Well, at that point, I went to a mission, and it was a Cherry Hill mission in South Jersey. And I went down and I said to the mission holder, Norm Muller, I says, I want to buy some auditing. And we got started. I took my whole family down. We used to all go down on a Saturday. And one of the little asides of going down there was I had a BMW in those days.
All right.
And there was a humpback railroad crossing. And by accident one time, I'm going a little bit too fast. So when we had over that, we kind of went gravity free for a little. So every time we get down, my kids would yell, "Jump it, Dad, jump it." And I'd jam on the gas pedal and jump in the air on it. Just a little fun I had with them, I'll tell you something. I had a lot of fun with my kids. I had a lot of fun. I taught them how to swim when they were 3 years old, how to dive off a 3-meter board when they were 4. I used to teach them how to cook things, put them around the stove and have them all practice. My boys worked on a car with me. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but this goddamn disconnection policy, I'm telling you, man.
Yeah, let's get into it.
That wasn't how I look at it.
Yeah.
I may not have been the greatest father in the world, but I backed up my kids always. I try to do the best for them. And then for my girls to come against me, they have guns pointed to their head. You know that?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what it is. And if they don't disconnect from me from leaving, their friends will disconnect from them.
Right. We've had guests on from the Jehovah's Witness religion. We've had fundamentalists, Mormons on, Muslims on, and they all have their kind of own shunning policy.
Yeah.
And the Scientology version is to disconnect, which means that if you are a defector or a suppressive person, is what they call it, that your family and friends and everyone has to disconnect from you. They can no longer have any interaction with you whatsoever, and no one is safe. You're the father of the leader of the Church of Scientology, and even you have fallen victim to this terrible policy.
Oh, yeah. I know we jumped ahead in this, but if you want to get back to, I just told you about David and me getting the family in, and I'll tell you this. When you go in Scientology, in those days anyway, this is in 1970 when I got in proper, you take courses or there's drills that you do that do improve, let's say, your communication skills. You actually learn the exact communication formula to have successful communications with people. There's many parts to it. Right. And if you learn this and apply it, you apply it in life, you can say, hey, wait a minute, this works. All right? And there's other counseling, or we would call auditing. The unique thing about Scientology auditing is that auditor doesn't evaluate for you or invalidate what you're saying. The whole idea of it is to lead you to find out how you got in that position or what's bothering you, so you come to your own little awareness. Hey, wow, I shouldn't close my hand in a car door. It hurts when I do that, whatever.
So an honest auditor could be a good therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, all you have to do to be a good auditor is have good communication skills. That's the biggest thing of all. This was so unique that I decided to take my whole family to England, and we went there, and we stayed there for about 1 year and 3 months, and all the kids studied Scientology as well as us. And while I was there, I got a band together, and we were playing at a local pub, and we had a fantastic time. Came back to the States for about 4 or 5 months, went back over to continue on with it. And while I was over there the second time, I got a recording deal with Polydor Records. I had a solo album, a writer's contract with Chappell's Publishing, and was asked to play on BBC.
So your life is improving. Things are going good.
It absolutely did. But now let's get back to the nitty-gritty here. As I said, when you first get in, these lower-level things are helpful. They work. You gain confidence in what you're being told because it's observably true when tested out against life. And that's the true test of anything. Measure it against life. Does it work? Is it not good to say, hello, pig face? Is that going to put you in bad with somebody?
Right.
So you just might say, hey, good afternoon, my friend. Okay, I'm giving you an extreme example, but
right. This was for the people in Philly, right? We're good.
Oh boy, don't get me started. But anyway, they have your confidence. Now here's how this works, and I guess you could say this is how a confidence scheme works. You are introduced to some factors or some facts that you agree with wholeheartedly. It's good to have good communication. If you have a problem with somebody, it's good to communicate rather than get in a fist fight, and you can solve it with good communication skills. And you gain these. Now, you get in a little further, and some things are introduced that seem, is this true? And you think, okay, well, so far everything that told me was true. I'm going to accept this without examining it against reality or common sense. Once you start on that, then you start accepting everything that comes down the pike. And this is how people get involved and go for this weenie or this big prize of being able to leave your physical body as a spiritual being and operate outside of it with no mechanical means to assist you. As an example,
right.
Leave your body, go to Europe, and read a German newspaper.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you, fellas, I was in Scientology for 42 years. I've never met one person who has achieved that.
Yeah.
Not one or two, not one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not true.
Yeah.
And I'm being very gracious when I say it's just not true. Okay.
Yeah. And I had a question too on, since we're talking about concepts like that they teach you going clear, all of these superpowers that you can acquire as a human. One of the other things with the Sea Org is the billion-year contract that you have to sign. Was that in place when you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So was there anyone that ever came back and said, hey, I'm here to serve my second term in this billion-year contract?
Personally, I don't know of anybody. Okay. But I can tell you this, though. I know that just from reading books or being on the internet, there have been people, not even in Scientology, who came back and said they were so-and-so and gave data. And when you go to where they said they were, it proved to be true.
Interesting.
And, this is up. Do you believe it or don't you believe it? Well, that's a personal thing.
Right.
I'm not forcing that on anybody. Just
right.
And as far as religion is concerned, whatever you want to believe in, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see, how does David react to all this? So his asthma, he's got to feel a lot better that his asthma is gone, right?
Yeah,
or for the most part under control. Is he getting into like Scientology like you are? Is he wildly curious, or is he doing his own thing?
No, he probably of all the kids, he and put me in, I'm not a kid, but I'm the father. He and I were probably the two most enamored with it and what it could do for us. I will say that. David immediately took to it like a duck to water, okay? Mm. And he became an auditor, and he was auditing other people.
Like 15 or 16? Or?
He was 13 when he first
And he started working directly with L. Ron Hubbard on films.
Well,
correct?
I'll tell you how that worked.
Sure.
When he was sick, when he was 15 years old, I came home from work one time. We lived in Broomall, Pennsylvania at the time. And he's laying in his bedroom with his kind of head in his hands like that, I say, hey, what's up, Dave? He says, Dad, I don't want to go to school anymore. I said, really? He's, listen, all the kids take drugs. Nobody behaves. They don't listen to the teachers. It's like a little madhouse. He says, I want to go and help L. Ron Hubbard. I said, you're kidding me. He says, no. He says, I really want to do that. Well, at the time, I thought to myself, you know what? I was 17 years old when I walked up in my dad's office. He had an insurance brokerage in Mount Carmel. And I had the Marine recruiter there, and I said, Dad, I want to join the Marines, but you got to sign for me. He said, Jesus Christ, Ronnie, you want to join the Marines? He said, the first ones in, are you out of your mind? Well, I tell people that you got to be a little nuts to join the Marines, and I qualified in that aspect, all right? Anyway, he did sign for me, and as it turned out, it was one of the most profitable time I've ever spent in my life doing anything. So now, look, he's going to be 16 in a couple months. That he really has gotten a lot out of it for himself. He's seen how he can improve other people's lives through auditing. Why not? I said, okay, Dave, I'll tell you what. I says, you want to do that? He said, I really do. So I'll help you out. So I bought him clothes. I gave him some money, and I got a ticket for him. And the day after his 16th birthday, we were down at the Philadelphia airport and watching him put his bicycle on the top rack, and he was going to fly down and join the Sea Org. And he did, and 8 months later, he was working with L. Ron Hubbard.
Wow. And I had a question about that in the household. We've had ex-Catholic people on the show where they say, the priest comes to their house. It's a really proud moment for the family because they're working with the priest. He's this person in the community that's awe-inspiring. Yeah. And working with L. Ron Hubbard's almost like working with the Pope in this sense. Yeah. So what was your thought process?
I was very proud of him. Very proud. Look, I was a dyed-in-the-wool Scientologist. I got a lot of people involved in it to do courses and move up the bridge, as they say. So to me, for him going in and then working with L. Ron Hubbard.
And being so young. He's not even 18 even.
16.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look at, how old was Alexander the Great when he conquered all those countries?
Yeah, 25. Yeah. So, yeah.
Or maybe 26, who gave a year? Who the hell knows, by the way?
Right.
But the age had nothing to do with it. He was capable at that age of doing things that guys 10, 15, 20 years senior were doing. Listen, you got to get one thing. David is not a stupid person.
No, doesn't sound like
I mean, he was a child. As a child, he was very bright. Him and one other kid in grade school were picked as the two brightest children in that grade school and went to some teachers' convention where they were shown off by the Willingboro School District. He had a great sense of humor. Tough little kid. I mean, look, he played Little League football. I used to put in a 2.5-pound plate in each of his shorts pockets so he could make the minimum weight to play football because he was always small. But he could take down a guy 20 pounds. He could give away 20 pounds. He could tackle anybody.
Yeah. Very driven.
Very driven and a very strong little kid. Look, he was in the Junior Olympics.
Yeah.
For the region, and he made it through 2 wrestling matches in one day. The third one, he was so exhausted he just couldn't go on. But
well, I think a good testament to that is the fact that L. Ron, when he passed, he didn't name a successor. There was nobody that was in place, and David essentially worked the higher ranking members, if you will, and essentially assumed power. Is that accurate?
It's completely accurate. But let me give you a little backstory on that, okay?
Sure.
He had a tremendous asthma attack at a point where he had to be taken to the hospital, to the emergency room. The guy that took him there was named Paul Grady. And Paul told me this story. He said, David came out and said, Paul, I just had a realization. Power is not granted. It is assumed. And with that in mind, he started moving people out of the way who would stop him from rising to the top and putting people in place that agreed with him. And that's how he did it. And he rose to the top.
Yeah. That is true. When you can assume power, it's easier to abuse it. When you're granted power, it's easier to be in the middle, I think. I mean,
look at somebody grants you power. Who agrees with that?
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe other people say, hey, wait a minute. I don't think you have
You'd
power.
have to have consensus.
Not only did he assume power, he then takes the IRS to task, essentially, wins against the IRS. And
that was the turning point.
Yep.
That was the turning point.
You're a hero. That's Joe Montana, right?
Yeah.
You
boy, that's a good example. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, he won the Super Bowl. And by the way, there were people that helped him. And one of the people that helped him was Monique Yingling, who was the attorney who was on the 2020 show representing Scientology.
Who isn't even a Scientologist.
She's a Catholic.
Right.
And she brought biscuits to the interview. Jesus Christ almighty. What should I have brought in a 6-pack of Blatz beer,
Blatz.
No, you know,
The
maybe
good
Miller.
Milwaukee
Old
reference.
Milwaukee.
Old Milwaukee. Miller's Genuine Draft.
There you go.
Here you go, Dan. Here's your beer, you know.
I'm interested in when L. Ron is kind of getting kind of weird and a little bit skittish about the government and is moving around in the Sea Org and hiding at some point. And David is giving messages back and forth while he's in hiding. Are you weirded out by kind of the fact that he's in hiding, and or are you proud of him for like he seems to be the right-hand man at that point?
Okay, I knew those things after the fact. That was very privy knowledge to a handful of people.
So you didn't know?
Well, exactly when it was happening, no.
Okay.
I mean, you know, but then I knew about it from people who were there who, you know, told me these things, and I have no reason to believe that they were lying, and they weren't lying. He had control of the communication directly with L. Ron Hubbard. So he controlled that communication line to the actual power. And L. Ron Hubbard, no matter, you know, he had a heart attack, a stroke. And this is funny because it's not funny, but when I was in the Sea Organization, I ran the music department for many years. And we would get recordings of L. Ron Hubbard telling us how he wants the music for this thing. And his voice was very halting, and he'd talk like that, and totally unlike any lectures he's ever given. And I should think to myself, you know, something happened with him. And it was right after he had the stroke. He kept on working, though. And I did notice that. And by the way, you don't dare bring this up when it's happening. You don't bring this up to the people around him and say, hey, what's with this? You know, it doesn't sound right. You'd go in for interrogation.
He's beyond reproach at that point. He's a hero.
Totally and utterly. But anyway, yeah. So now David has charge of the communication lines. He then just he sees the opening after L. Ron Hubbard died to rise to the top, and he takes it. And he just moves people out of the way and puts people in, and just... That's how he did it.
And what were your thoughts there? What did you know exactly, like the political maneuverings that he was doing, and what did you feel about it when he kind of became the head guy?
I didn't know the exact political movings, but I was there. I was in the Sea Organization when L. Ron Hubbard died.
Yes.
And he took the old RTC, Religious Technology Center people, and had them sit in the qualifications area at desk and write down all of their transgressions against the church and all the overts, you know, overt for your public is a harmful act that you commit to somebody or something that you don't do that then is harmful. Like you could have saved somebody from drowning just by reaching your hand to him. Well, that's an overt of omission, but the guy drowned. I'm giving you real little examples here.
Does your relationship change when he becomes the top dog?
My relationship changed with David as soon as I joined the Sea Org because I was in for some weeks and I was standing outside the music studio and he was walking, I don't know, 30, 40 yards away from me and with his entourage. And I just said, hey, Dave, I yelled. He turned and looked at me and he gave me a look that I knew I shouldn't have done that. And it came home to me that on that base, which is located near Hemet, California, I was not his father. I was a staff member. And when he talked to me, he called me Ron. When he sent me a birthday card or a Christmas present, he put "Dear Dad." All right, but in person, he never called me Dad.
Wow. And what? Okay, so that instant, how old was he at that?
Let's see, about 25.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's still in the 80s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think that's why the book is so properly titled Ruthless. I mean, the as time goes on, you know, he's doing terrible things to I guess the upper management, the Sea Org, when he creates the hole and he has the Marty Rathburn, all these people live in the hole. Were you aware of this taking place while you were in the Sea Org?
Was I aware of the hole?
The hole.
Well, that trailer, there was a couple of trailers that were put together and turned into a building, was right outside the musical rehearsal room. I'd walk past that every day. And I could see people coming out of there marching two abreast to go and eat down at our mess hall. And you could see the artificial smiles on their face. If you ever said anything to anybody, how you doing? They'd, oh, I'm doing great. You know, like
Right.
you could see they're putting on a face, because if they didn't do that, they're just going to get creamed. And this is how it went. Yeah, I was right next to it. I mean, I was there when there was a U-Haul truck outside of it. And I think, what the hell is this doing here, you know? Then I found out later on they played this game called musical chairs, which I don't want. It's a long story, and
I think most of our listeners probably have seen Going Clear, and if not, that's a great description there. But yeah, musical chairs,
and that U-Haul truck was a farce. That was supposed to be a truck to take their luggage to plane flights to small and failing organizations as their punishment for whatever whim was going on at the time.
Yeah. So you escape in on March 25th, 2012.
Yes.
What was where was your head at that point? What are you thinking?
I knew I had to get out. And I was willing to confront whatever. Hey, listen, I was 76 years old when I left.
Right. How long had you been thinking about leaving, though? You probably don't decide that on a whim. How long was the cognitive dissonance going on?
Maybe 10 years prior, I'd have a doubt as to, do I really want to do this? And of course, my wife, Becky, is an absolute optimist. And she'd say, listen, Ron, it's going to get better. It can't stay this way. It will get better. This went on for years. And what would happen is we would do some terrific project, and I'd come up with a win where we did a great album or something. I'd feel, yeah, this is not bad. You know, I'll take care of it. But then another thing would happen. I thought, Jesus Christ, I can't tolerate this. What really was the straw that broke the camel's back was we had a different music director come in. I gave up the post, and I used to write music. Now, I was the only one in the music department who actually had a company, Polydor Records, give me a recording contract to play my music, and also get a contract with the publishing company for my writings. But all of a sudden, I couldn't write music anymore. They wanted the new type of music, and the music director, I would write music day after day, week after week, month after month, and not anything would get approved. It's like you guys coming to work every day, and at the end of the day, your boss says, you're no good.
Right. All of your ideas have been rejected.
Okay, exactly. That's a terrible idea. I don't know why I put up with you. I'm going to have to replace you one of these days. But you would never get replaced. And you'd say, well, listen, I quit. No, you can't quit. I couldn't quit. This went on. And finally, you remember I told you earlier that you'd agree to this, and then you'd agree to the next thing, and just gradiently, a little bit at a time, you're building a mental prison. I go into this in the book as to how this works, so I'll just briefly describe it. As an example, when I lived on that base, we were presented with the fact that our mail had to be checked before it went out. The reason for that is that we don't want the possibility of some, secret things that are going on and known by the public. And your mail coming in, we don't want you to be upset by anything.
You were a Marine. Your mail had been read before.
What, in the Marines?
Yeah.
They don't do that
during wartime.
During the wartime, yeah. But in peacetime, no. But anyway, so now you sign away the right to have your mail. Like if you send a letter out, you had to put it in an envelope with a stamp on it, unsealed. The security force would read it, and if there was anything they didn't feel was right, they'd send it back, correct this, and you had to write it directly before it would go out.
Whoa.
Okay, now, then on the other thing, we had a guy here who was telling his mother all the things that Tom Cruise has been doing on his base, and she was selling the information to some rag like the Inquirer. So now because of that guy doing that, when you're talking on the telephone and you have to get permission to talk to people on the phone, we have somebody listening in on the phone. As an example, when my brother died and my nephew Gerard called and said, Uncle Ron, Dad died, I had somebody listening in on an extension.
Wow.
Constantly under surveillance, constantly being watched, no matter what you do.
Barbed wire pointing in as well as out. So they're not trying to keep people just out. They don't want anybody to jump that fence.
Yeah, and that was my question on that too. When we talk wide topics with people leaving religions, it doesn't require you actually escaping, but you cannot leave the compound.
Correct. So let me get back. You said when you asked the question, Did this come? No, it came gradiently. Yeah. I gradiently started thinking, look, I can't handle this. Finally, I would write this music and it would go on for months and get nothing approved, but I'd still get paid. No, there wasn't a problem. And I said, but Jesus Christ, I'm not doing anything.
Right.
I mean, I can't live life with no exchange. You guys do something, you get paid for it, and you can exchange that for the wherewithal of living. And I just felt terrible. So I called for a meeting with David. I sent him, I said, look, I really got to speak to you. So we had a meeting at this, there's a ship built right on the property at this base. We're in the room, and I told him, I said, listen, Dave, I write music every day, month after month, and I get everything disapproved. Can you get me another job? I says, I'll take a job in motor pool. I'll wax cars. So at the end of the day, you can't say that car's not waxed. There it is. And I'm doing something worthwhile. He said, I'll look into it. Well, he never looked into it. Some months later, I said to Becky, we're leaving. She says, okay. We planned our escape for 6 months.
Wow.
We had to plan it out for 6 months. I set it up so that the day we were going to leave, I would have the security guards conditioned to my doing one particular thing. And I'll tell you what it was. We lived in berthing on the base, and in our berthing rooms, we weren't allowed to have a coffee maker, a refrigerator, anything. So on early Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, which was breakfast time, I would drive my car from the lower side of the base through a security gate to the north side, go into the music studio where there was a refrigerator. And I always kept things like Italian salami, prosciutto, maybe Parmesan cheese. And I'd take some and I'd drive through the other security gate where the guards were and give the guards some cheese, some salami. And they liked it. So they got a little treat every Sunday morning. The day we escaped, we got up. And by the way, I was up about 2 hours earlier. I had a notebook figuring all the things I was taking. I took off my Nextel, put it down. Took off the pager, took it down.
Oh, blood pressure probably 160. Yeah, it hurts beating.
Let me tell you something. This was a move, okay? Mm-hmm. So now we're driving. As I said, there were 2 gates. One didn't have a security guard on it. The other one was where the security guards were, like a bulletproof thing. But at that gate, there was a camera, the other gate where I was going to go through. So I knew there were 2 security guards on post. One would be in the booth, and the other one should be eating breakfast. And when I went past our mess hall area, I saw the car that Sal was driving, and I knew he was in having breakfast. So I drove past it, and about 200 yards down is the gate. We're driving up to the gate. I have the entire car filled with stuff, and if the guard would have said, come to the gate, I was done for it. I pressed the button. He didn't even say anything. He figured I'm going to the studio. The gate opened. I pulled out. I says, Becky, we're turning left. She says, let's go.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, I floored that.
Wow.
And about 1.5 miles down the road, there was 3 roads. One would go right to Route 10. One would go straight to Route 60. The left one would go into town. I thought, I'm going left because Sal, if he's chasing me, is going to take one of the other ones. We got in, and I turned into the boondocks, and we were free.
Were you looking back, or did the Pavlovian sense of he's getting his treats, that did you kept looking back, were you being followed at any point?
No. Well, I lost him at that point, and I knew this. If I didn't see him once I turned left, I was going down the road because you could see for a good 400 or 500 yards. There was nobody in back of me. But I know what happened. When I pulled out, the security guard said, hey, Ron, you got in the Nextel. And I didn't have mine with me because they can trace you then. Hey, what the hell are you doing, man? Run, and start yelling. Yeah. Sal, get up here right now, pronto. So Sal had to get out of MCI, Massacre Canyon Inn, that was the name of the berthing, the mess hall, go out to the truck or the chase car, turn it around, go to the booth, and then Sal would say, listen, Ron just blew. You got to get him.
Wow.
It was too late.
Wow. Well, it was too late in that instance, and I guess that's where it takes us locally here. Becky, your wife Becky, has family in Wisconsin?
In Whitewater.
In Whitewater. Is that where you guys headed after?
Yes.
Afterwards?
We did come to Whitewater, and it took us about 2.5 days to drive across the country. I drove all the way, and I didn't pay for food with my credit card. I didn't buy gas. I paid cash. We stayed in the motel 2 nights. I paid cash for that. And then we stopped at a Walmart and got a flip-top telephone so that we could
burner
phone, yeah.
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 And finally, when we were on the edge of Wisconsin, I couldn't go any further. I was really beat, so we had to stay in a motel. Next morning, we woke up. Becky called her brother and said, Donnie, we're coming home. And Donnie yelled out to somebody in the room, somebody get me a drink. Becky's coming home.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. But
and it was brandy. You remember now, this is Wisconsin.
Yeah. So you're in Whitewater, and then you transition to West Allis, and this is where we learn from with you being in West Allis.
Yeah.
West Allis is only 20 minutes away from the studio here. It's very close to suburb of Milwaukee. We had Tony Ortega on, and we were going through the cult influences on Scientology. He was talking about L. Ron and how he was involved in the cult, and it was a fantastic interview. And we had talked about you being in West Allis, and then we looked up the West Allis police report, and if you can tell this story, I mean, this is Scientology at its best, sending people out, paying them $10,000 a week to spy on you, to live next to you, to essentially harass you.
They were going to buy a house around the corner from me just so they would be close by and could look at my house through the windows. They're going to buy it. They're not going to rent it.
Right,
okay?
right.
And the church said, okay, what is it, 150 G's? Here you go. No big deal. We'll put it in a paper bag or something, Yeah.
That's what they did that to Marty Rathburn as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what happened. Dwayne Powell was the private investigator who was lurking around that house. And there was a woman on the street who saw this, called the West Allis police and said, listen, there's a guy out here. He really looks suspicious. I think he's a drug dealer. So they sent out Sergeant Meese, and he saw the guy. And meanwhile, Nick Pye, who was the West Allis police, he was a detective at the time. Right now, he's a lieutenant. A great individual. Mm-hmm. And do you know Nick? Did you ever meet him?
No, I have not personally. Well, I've heard him in the interviews.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. He looks like a linebacker, and he looks like he can bench press 400 pounds. Now, he's a good friend of mine now. He can bench press 400 pounds, by the way. He's the type of guy, if you were in a little fracas with somebody and he appeared on the scene, you might just say, you know what, maybe we can settle this.
Not worth it. Not worth it, right?
No, I mean, he's
an intimidating fellow.
Soft-spoken. Mm-hmm. But I tell you something, you don't want to tangle with him. He's a real American police officer. I'm telling you, he's for the person, and they're against criminals. That's the whole West Allis police. I say, God bless them, man. But anyway, he appeared on the scene then and start talking to the guy, and this guy started giving him some crap. Well, what law am I breaking? He says, look, I just want to see your identification. Why do I have to show that to you? He says, you know what? You're under arrest, man. So that was it. And he said, do you mind if I look in your car? And the guy said, no. Now, all of this, if the guy said, oh, I apologize, I'm looking to buy the house. Sorry about that. Here's my ID.
Right.
I wouldn't be talking to you today. There'd be no book that was written. That was a turning point. He goes to the van, and in the trunk of the van, there's 5 license plates from different states, 5 handguns, a stun gun, 2 rifles, 1 fitted up with a homemade silencer, and over 2,000 rounds of ammunition.
Wow. That you're right. Right away, that guy's got to be a terrorist suspect or something. I mean, that's bad.
Yeah. Well, if people want to hear this interview, it is on the Tony Ortega Underground Bunker. You can hear the interview, and you can hear what Daniel Powell said that happened earlier than that when they were following me and I was down in Janesville shopping at an Aldi store. You want me to tell that story now?
Well, actually, I have the audio here prepped up. So if you want to tell a story, you can follow it up with the 10 seconds of him explaining this. It's, again, ruthless. Absolutely ruthless.
You want to play the audio first?
Let's play the audio, and then we'll do a quick a recap on it.
Okay.
This is the West Allis police talking to
Daniel Powell.
Daniel Powell.
Daniel is the son of Dwayne. They were in business together.
With your knowledge of David, or not your knowledge, what you do know about David, my question is this. Either wittingly or unwittingly, what do you think would happen if his dad did something that just blew David out of the water?
I can tell you right now. We got a call from David Miscavige last week. Because my dad made a comment. Because I told my dad, I said, Senior looks like he's having heart problems. Because he was hunched over and he was grabbing his chest and he was grabbing his back. And I made a comment to my dad. I said, he looks like he's having heart problems. My dad then relayed that message to his boss, which is, I don't know, Greg or somebody.
Yeah.
And Greg then relayed that message to Ron. Ron then called my dad and said, if he dies, he dies. Don't intervene.
And Ron is the attorney?
Or no, not Ron. Not Ron.
David.
David called my dad and said, if he dies, he dies. Don't intervene.
Well, I can tell you what actually happened. I had bags of groceries. I was out in the car, and I opened the door, and I bent over to put the groceries in the car. And this is the summertime, and I had a pocket T-shirt on, and my cell phone was in my pocket. I bent over. I thought the cell phone was going to fall on the ground, and I grabbed the cell phone.
And this is what was mistaken for heart problems.
Exactly. I grabbed my cell phone, and they looked at it and thought, oh, wait a minute, that guy's going to have a heart attack. And if you were to play that any further, you can hear that his father said to him, listen, I don't care what they say. If this happens to that old man again, you call 911. Don't go there, because if you take a picture of us, we're going to get sued. But you call 911. And he goes into it further, what he thinks about that remark that David made.
Right.
Yeah.
So the police
Absolutely ruthless.
would think, I mean, you see this kind of 2,000 rounds of ammunition. I mean, who needs that? I mean, right away you're thinking hitman.
Yeah.
And that, so ultimately a lot of this comes out. Do you get kind of broken free now that you kind of have, in a way, police protection, or there's a credible threat on you? Does this kind of give you more room to talk about this?
I guess it does, but let me say this. If you're going to do what I did, you can't worry about consequences, because you're going to be very ineffective. You can't start thinking about that. And I developed a certain attitude when I was in the Marines. And at that young age, I don't think I would have been able to verbalize it or give you a theory, not a theory, but a state of mind that you'd have to have. But I can say it now, and I'd like to tell you that. And that is this. If you're going to do something that has some danger involved in it, or a lot of danger, but danger involved, what you have to do is disregard any of the consequences or potential consequences that may take place because of what you're doing, and concentrate on what you're doing and why you're doing it. Disregard that stuff and go full speed ahead. In other words, the old statement, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
Right.
You got to take that attitude. If you're thinking about, oh, what are they going to do to me? No, right. Don't even do it. Okay? Mm-hmm. Don't even attempt to do it, because you're going to be a failure.
Right.
If you're going to do something like this, go full speed ahead.
So same attitude as on the escape. Right, you're over the dwelling point. You're doing.
Yep. And I applaud everything that you're doing. Speaking out on what you're doing. I mean, the media that you've been doing it's been intense, you know. And knowing that David is as ruthless as he is, and has essentially a ton of money at his disposal, and billions of dollars, and. So I applaud you 100%. I am happy to see the mainstream starting to change a little.
Yeah.
Scientology is always kind of ignored, you know, even though they have human rights violations, they're always kind of overlooked. You know, you have the issues with the Catholic Church, Islam's always, on the docket. But now we're starting to see documentaries like Going Clear.
Yep.
Jamie DeWolf hinted at a potential Showtime special coming out, and Leah Remini with her docuseries, she's really exposing some of the atrocities that take place. So
she is, but I'm going to back up just a little bit and tell you this. Even after I heard this on the tape, and Nick Pye played it for me so I could hear it, even after that, I was not going to write a book.
Wow.
I was not going to do it. I called to try to get in touch with David after this happened to tell him, listen, knock off this shit having me followed. I just don't like it. He didn't come on. He had an attorney come on, and the attorney said to me, get this. David doesn't feel he can trust you, so he's not going to talk to you. Jesus Christ, I'm following with guys who have a silencer, 5 handguns, but he doesn't feel he can trust me.
Right. As if you're the threat.
I mean, okay, so now I said, okay, Mike, that was the attorney's name. I said, look, just knock off the crap. Don't have me followed. Is that a threat? I said, come on, don't get into it. Don't go into the Perry Mason bullshit. Just knock it off.
Stop playing the victim when you're.
Okay, so now that ended in no success at all. I just stopped talking to him, hung up. So then my wife and I decided that we're going to go and see my daughters. And I had a CD of these interviews with me. So we drove to Florida, where my daughters live. Got within 50 miles. I have PIs following me. I had 3 PIs following me when I was down there. I confronted them. One guy was at Walmart parked, and I come out. He said, hey, come here a minute. And he started walking away from me. I said, Jesus Christ, I want to talk to you. I'm walking faster. Finally, he runs away and jumps over a fence. This is happening to me, okay?
Yeah.
So now I go to my daughter Lori's place, and there was no answer, and her car wasn't there. So I go to my daughter Denise's place, knock on the door, and her husband came to the door, opened the door a crack, maybe 4 inches or so. And I said, look, Jerry, I'd like to speak to Denise. He says, well, she's not home, and she won't talk to you. You have to go to the church and get this handled. I said, Jerry, for Christ's sake. Who are you kidding, man? This is going to result in nothing. The only way to resolve this is let me speak to Denise. Well, you can't, and you got to handle it with the church. Just go and do the proper steps. Finally, after about 20 minutes, I said, Jerry, what is this? He said, listen, Ron, Denise and I are through with you and Becky forever. That was the point I decided to write this book. At that exact moment. Yeah. I was willing to let everything else slide. At that moment, I thought, you know what? I got to expose this.
Yeah.
I got to expose it. I don't care what happens to me. They just can't keep on doing this to people. And if my book is to help one family get back in communication with their children or friends with friends, I'll be happy. Okay? When I got out, I had many people say to me, Ron, you got to write a book and expose them. I said, I don't want to do that. All I want to do is get on with my life. I want to play music. I like physical fitness. There's an apparatus I've used for 52 years called an Exergenie. I sell those. I have, and because it's worked for me, it's kept me fit. I'm 81 years old. I still get around.
Looking good.
Yeah, well, there you go. And play music and write humorous books. I've written a couple of humorous books and self-published. Those are the things I wanted to do. I didn't want to tangle with the church.
Right.
When Jerry said that to me, we're through with you forever, I thought, fuck you. Yeah. I'm writing this book.
Right. Yeah. And do you believe that Jerry and Denise were probably compelled to make a decision that they either had to be completely against you or...
That's the disconnection. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Yeah, that is it. Because if Denise spoke to me, she has a daughter in the Sea Organization. Tara would never speak to her again.
Right.
Her friends would disconnect from her. She'd lose her job. She works for a Scientology company. Lori works for a Scientology employer. If Lori said hello to me, boom, she's an SP.
And you're seeing you could imagine somebody else's family and the chaos that'd be created. And I just want to say on a human level, I not being a father myself, but understanding my own relationship with my father, that's got to be really hard to not be able to communicate with your son. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah. It's a sad thing.
It's terrible. At best, it's terrible. At best, all right? But this is what they do. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, okay? And let me tell you, people say to me, you're brave, you're courageous. No, I don't think I am, but I know this. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do this. Oh. That I do know. And I do know that I just, what I told you, disregard the consequences, keep on purpose, and know why you're doing is the proper thing to do.
Right.
There is such a thing as a rightness of actions. And, you can live, nobody lives a perfect life. You show me a perfect man, I'll call you a liar, okay? But you're doing your best you can to help your fellow man, to help. As a matter of fact, I tell you, I could start a religion now, and there would be 3 rules, and that's all. And I'll tell you what it is.
Go ahead.
Help somebody, help something, and don't send me any money.
Yeah, we like that.
That's the religion.
That's fantastic.
Help somebody, help something, and don't send me any money. Look, that's the hook. This is how come you have people in the Sea Organization who are not stupid.
Right.
But innate in these people, or part of their makeup as humans, is they want to help. We feed birds, all right? As a matter of fact, there's wild rabbits that come to us to eat. My wife was in the garage calling her mother because, well, she likes to sit out there. Rabbit comes in the garage, puts himself in front of her, like, where's my food?
Oh.
So you want to help things like that. You want to help somebody who's down and out, maybe. Give them a hand, just don't let them lay in the gutter. Pick them up, Get them going. Give them a job or something.
Well, I think that's what you're doing is you are helping the fellow man by showcasing what you went through this experience and dealing with all the harassment afterwards. And, you say you're not brave and courageous. I personally think you are. The amount of influence and money that Scientology has to go after their defectors or whatever they call them, and the smear campaigns that they put on these. We saw you speaking at the library a couple weeks ago, and you were talking about your book, Ruthless. This is what we do. I went online, social media, to try and tweet at you and say, oh, Ron's doing this, kind of live tweeting, that's what we call it. And the Twitter pages that I found were created by Scientology. And the reason I knew that is because it was, your quotes are saying, I'm a terrible person, I'm this, I'm that. This is what this church does.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Yeah.
They're not okay. They're bad hombres, let me tell you.
Right.
These are bad people.
Right.
And
the higher ups, right? Like the rank and file, you feel are maybe caught in a system. It's those in power.
yes, but the closer you get to that, the more you assimilate those characteristics. It goes from the bottom of maybe people who are just staff members doing a job and trying to get by and trying to keep on believing that what you're doing is the right thing.
Right.
But then as you get a little higher, promoted, you're getting a little closer to the source of this, and you start taking on those characteristics. And when you're right next to them, you're getting as bad as the top of it. And the top of it is David Miscavige. And I can tell you this. He went from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you how it happened, or the root of it as far as I'm concerned. You ever hear the expression, power corrupts?
Yes.
Okay, the guy that said that was a guy by the name of Lord Acton. He was a British member of Parliament. He lived in the 1800s, died in the early 1900s. And the exact statement is, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Mm-hmm. But he also said this, which many people don't know. Great men tend to be bad men. You can look this up.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, I think that power is like a drug, like crack cocaine. Once you get some of that power, you want more of it.
And you don't want to lose it.
And that's why David went from this, did an about face.
Yeah, especially power assumed versus power bestowed.
Yeah.
Right, that's the other thing. Well, Ron, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. We have millions of questions for you, but we're not going to get to them today. You have agreed to be at the conference on September 30th. Ron will be at the conference.
September 30th, 2017.
2017, thank you. The Mythinformation Conference IV, where Ron will be selling books, signing books, and we're going to do a special thing for the VIP. Offer Ron 30 minutes to speak on Ruthless, on your experience in Scientology. There's going to be hundreds of people there with questions for you, so we're really excited for that.
Great. Well, guys, thanks for having me on. I appreciate
Ron, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on a personal level, I just want to say thanks for having the moral courage to do this.
Absolutely.
It's obvious that you're not doing it for selfish reasons.
Exactly.
You're doing it for altruistic reasons, which is a good thing. We appreciate that.
And we're here to support that 100%.
We're also glad that you can do what you really wanted to do all along, which was get back to your music. And playing in Dixieland, which I think is your favorite. And doing some gigs around here.
Yeah, those that are local, you're at the Piper Pizza every
the Oregon Piper Pizza. Now that's just the first Wednesday of every month, and
Excellent.
That I'm a guest artist with the band there. But most of the gigs I do are private gigs for like special parties or conventions and things like that. And
you're for hire.
Pardon me.
You're for hire, musician for hire.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can provide you with solo performances or a Dixieland band, or if you like the traditional, what I call the golden age of songwriting, the things that they wrote over the last 50 or 100 years. I do those. But my favorite, I got to be honest with you, is Dixieland, though.
Right.
Anyway,
the New South Rampart Street Paraders.
That's who plays at the Oregon Piper, and that's on Highway 100, right near Walmart.
There you go.
Yeah. So check them out, and check them out in September live. Ron, thank you again so much.
Okay.
For joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. The Mythicist Milwaukee Show is brought to you by Mythicist Milwaukee, producer Sean Frasick, associate producer Fritz Blandone, Engineer Jason Lawson, and hosts Brian Edward and Jacob Wolfel. Every week, we produce a new broadcast that sheds light on religion, secularism, and mythology. If you enjoy this show, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/mythicist. Closing theme, written and performed by Shelley Siegel.
There was a time when everyone believed Helios in the sun, Poseidon in the sea, Athena's wisdom, beauty, and Hades underneath, Isis of fertility and ether to breathe. They all lie at rest, and who will be the next to die? You know they're all myths, but who will be the next to die? There was a time when everyone believed Helios in the sun, Poseidon in the sea, Athena's wisdom, beauty, and Hades underneath, Isis of fertility and ether to breathe. They all lie at rest, and who will be the next to die? You know they are all myths. Well, who will be the next to die? Hi.